Night Dreams Talk Radio Network brings you The World Paranormal News with James Creechbaum. Now, the latest news.
This is Night Dreams Talk Radio Network News. I'm James Creechbaum. UFO hovering above Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. The UFO video that was submitted was from the 13th of February, and here's the witness account. My daughter and I recorded a UFO last Thursday night in the sky to the west of our home. It was a spear of light in the sky. Two other light spears appeared as well shortly after we began recording. The lights would fade in and out. White lights seemed to briefly shoot out from one side of the middle light. The light stayed in the same location until a military aircraft began flying toward it. The light started to fade more to the west after about 9 minutes or so when the plane was flying toward it, and then we stopped recording when it wasn't visible anymore. Appalling alien abduction, and here's the account. I sensed that there was someone in my bedroom, but all I could see was a spot of light in the corner by the dresser. Suddenly, several hands grabbed me from all around the bed. I attempted to scream, but I could not move or say anything. Nothing came out of my mouth. Within seconds, I found myself lying on a cold, hard table, completely nude and terribly uncomfortable. I looked around me, and there were 4 small beings in hoods and loose robes standing around me. They passed his hands. It was daylight, and I figured that I had been gone for about 5 hours when I tried to get out of my bed. When I tried to get out of the bed, my legs and hips were very stiff and sore. I carefully stood up and noticed 2 large spots of wet blood on the bed sheets. The experience with the beings was still fresh in my mind, but I had no idea that I had endured any probing or surgery. A few days later, I decided to schedule a doctor's appointment just to make sure I was okay. The doctor recommended a full physical. To make a long story short, I returned to the doctor's office a few days after the tests were performed. When I walked into her office, she asked me to sit down and explained that my right kidney was missing. She said that it was probably missing since birth and was just never noticed. Well, I found this hard to believe since I had given birth to my child and have had other x-rays in the past and other things done to me. I just agreed with her assessment. Now, I am positive that the beings removed my kidney and performed other experiments on my body. Since that encounter, I just know that they will be back. Here's an encounter with a frightening humanoid encounter at home. Tonight I was with my sister and FaceTiming with my friend in the basement when we hear a screeching sound. I run to the window to the next room where I believe I will be able to see whatever it is from the safe distance. But instead, I let out a scream and a flurry of curse words. Outside, standing taller than me for sure, I'm 6 foot, was a gaunt white humanoid figure with its back turned to the window. When I got back to the window and looked back out, it was nowhere to be seen. I, at first, thought, well, it was my mind playing tricks on me. There was snow on the ground, and I was dying for a rational explanation because it scared me. I was shaking. I told my sister, and she laughed at me. I went upstairs later that night and got everything ready for the night and locked up. When I went back up front, I froze. I could see my cat, who seemed agitated, on the garage roof, looking at something on the porch. That something was the same white figure with its back turned again, except this time it was squatting and looking at my cat. It didn't seem confrontational itself, but then, for God's sakes, this sent me into tears. It turned its whole body, it twisted, and it seemed to kind of straighten as it did. I can only think of a meerkat as for an example, But it was so sudden I was sure I heard bones crack through the window, and I never saw the face. As soon as it turned, my flight or fight kicked in, and I ran into my room as fast as I could. The last thing I saw of it, as I slammed my door, was it on the railing as it leaped towards what I assumed was a nearby tree. I first drew comparison to a rake creature, but this thing seemed calm and relaxed most of the time. I don't know what I saw. I am truly freaking out. Scientists discover an animal that doesn't breathe. For the first time ever, researchers have identified an animal that does not need to breathe oxygen to survive. Our discovery shows that evolution can go in strange directions. Aerobic respiration is a major source of energy, and yet we found an animal that gave up this critical pathway. Next news break, next show.
You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark with our host, Gary Anderson.
And we are back with our great guest, Terry Lovelace. He's been on the show, well, I think about 3 other times, about his encounter. He went camping with a buddy. They saw a object, it landed. They were taken aboard. They were stripped naked. They were experimented on, and he was lucky. Him and his friend were lucky. If I remember right, when the craft took off, there was other humanoids on that craft that wasn't released. He went back immediately to their air base they were stationed at, the hospital, and then it got really interesting, where he was actually interrogated. And then it kept going where, well, years went by. And he was talking about his implant before we went to the break. And that's where I want to go tonight, is about his implant and what has happened to him since then. Terry, again, this implant, I'm sure you were, I know that I was concerned, but I kind of shrugged it off at a certain point. But I haven't had visitations from ETs or seen anything that I'm aware of, but I think you have, haven't you?
I have. And you know, that was such a turning point in my life, October 25th, 2012, when I discovered this implant. And I saw that thing, and I knew that lay directly over that spot that used to go numb whenever I do my run. You know, and I just knew that it got in there somehow, and the most likely way that got in there was in 1977 that they put it in there. Some people have told me, maybe the Air Force put it in you. Maybe the government put it on you. I don't know. But
I don't think that back in the 70s, okay, they would have the technology to implant some type of device like that. I really don't. It would have had to been something that was way advanced to be able to put the implant in. And I honestly, I'm still trying to figure out what these implants do. Whitley says he's now to the point where it's communicating with him after all these years, and he's been able to communicate back with it. Still, it's really weird how it's controlling him with thoughts and stuff like that. Have you had anything weird going on?
Well, I have. A couple of things. When I wrote this book, I put it on the market on Amazon in March of 2018. Well, a couple months earlier, as I was, working on it, it was a manuscript at that point. I wanted this thing out of my leg. I mean, I wanted it gone. But the problem I had is, and you can probably relate to this, I had a heart attack in 2005. I had a stent in 2011. And no surgeon would touch me without a medical clearance letter from a cardiologist. Well, what cardiology does is they do a risk-benefit analysis, and if what's in you is benign and not causing you any problems, the risk of surgery is greater than the benefit of having it removed. So the standard of care in this country is to not remove it. Now, at the time, in October of 2017, I was considering a surgeon in Mexico who would do it for me. So I woke up. This is the last chapter in my book. And, it's so unbelievable. I I was hesitant to put it in there because it takes an otherwise believable scenario and adds this twist to it that's just so hard to believe. But it's true, and I left it in the book. I'm glad I did. I woke up late October 2017, sitting in my living room, bolt upright. I opened my eyes. The last thing I remember was I was in bed, with my wife down the hall, and seated directly across from me is what I first took to be a petite Asian woman, dressed in black, like a black blouse, with very long sleeves. And I realized later that her arms were disproportionately long, and she needed long sleeves to cover these long fingers. And she had on black, sturdy nursing shoes with a 2-inch heel to give her some height. Those were black as well. She wore black, oversized sunglasses, and she had on this cheap wig, dirty, cheap black wig that it didn't fit her properly. It was on her head kind of sideways, and I could come to realize the reason for that is because the back of her head was bulbous. It was misshapen. The back of her head was huge. It was disproportionately large to her skull. And I had that same calm. I woke up with this woman in my house. I wasn't freaked out. I wasn't running for a pistol. I wasn't, headed for the panic button on the alarm box, it's 4 feet away from me. I was absolutely dead calm. And I said to her, I had the thought, actually. I had just the thought. First thought was, I bet she's here about this thing in my leg. And I heard her clear as a bell in my head say yes, but her lips never moved. She was communicating with me telepathically. And I said, I wish she'd remove, I didn't say, next thought was, I wish she'd remove those glasses. And she did, like on cue.
Oh,
she reached up and removed them. And, I had I recognized that same sedation, that mild disinterest that I had in 1977. So I was under some kind of control, which makes sense because if they're going to talk to you, I'm sure they don't want you to grab your pistol or hit the alarm, But
or scream.
Or scream, yeah. That's funny you say that. I had thought about screaming for my wife, and I thought, no, I bet they got that covered too. She's not going to wake up, my cat's sitting there like nothing's going on, and she told me a couple of things. But the primary thing that she told me is that you cannot have this thing removed from your leg because it can't fall into the hands of terrestrial scientists. And she says, if you go ahead with your plan to have it removed, now how she knew that, I don't know. If you go ahead and proceed with your plans to have it removed, it'll be removed from your leg involuntarily. And that was the kind of the long and the short of it. And that made an impression on me, and it made me want to get it removed faster. And just a couple weeks later, I woke up and I had this injury. I had actually had injuries to the top of both of my legs that turned out to bruise terribly. There are pictures of it in the back of my book. You may have pictures of it in what I sent you. And I told my wife, I said, I think they came and took this thing out of my leg last night. And she's like, well, you got to find somebody to give you an x-ray. And I'm like, yeah, I want to know. So I took my copies of my x-rays showing the thing, and I went to a chiropractor's office. Because I knew, chiropractors look at 100 x-rays a week. And, you can't just walk into a standing radiology facility and order an x-ray, like a hamburger. They just, you got to have a prescription. You got to have some kind of something from the doctor to order it. So I waited to see this chiropractor, and this is the very next morning. And I didn't have an appointment. I wait 40 minutes. He calls me in. He says, okay,